baby boomers.
Used to be with it.
Millennials.
Okay, boomer.
Generation X.
What's going on?
And Gen Z. What do they have in common? Not a lot, it turns out. But one thing they can agree on is that this is the political podcast they want to listen to. Welcome to Not My Generation, the political podcast that looks at political events, news, and happenings across the world and at home through a generational lens. Your hosts are Dr. Emily Stacy and Professor James Davenport, two political scientists from Rose State College. But the views expressed on this program are solely the views of the host and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. Coming up on today's program.
There is no path to citizenship, period. You can look at the USCIS website. There is no path to citizenship. From DACA, you cannot just become a citizen. From being undocumented in the United States, you cannot just become a citizen.
There should be clear delineations of this so that there is no gray area when this happens. I'm going to get off my soapbox because I'm going to say some things.
DACA is not necessarily a legal status. It is deferred action, which means USCIS, United States Customs and Immigration Services, knows about your not legal status and has deferred action. They will not take action to deport or do any sort of removal proceedings.
It just confirms what I've been telling people all along, which is Emily is a rock star and she's getting recognized in all of these national media outlets. And now, here are James and Emily.
Hello. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm not starting things. Go ahead. Go. Hurry up.
Good morning, Dr. Stacy.
Oh, please. Only Dr. Sharp has to do that. And it's because of the reverence I have for him. I've been overseas with him. You call me Emily. Thank you. Hi, James. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I say really well. I'm in a good mood.
You're in a good mood.
I'm in a good mood. I had knee surgery over spring break and it's still a little iffy, but I'm up and moving. And so that's good. Yes. It's a busy time at school, as you know, and Rose is in the middle of a presidential search. And so everybody's kind of watching to see how that plays out and who's going to be our new leader, so to speak.
Uncertainty is always interesting. Yeah, right. The politics of it all.
And speaking of politics, there's just all sorts of stuff going on at the state level, at the national level, that has kept my interest and time. I've started a new side project. I've created myself a Substack account, and so I'm going to try to start posting semi-regularly on that.
And what is that? How can the folks reach you? I'm sure you'll put it up somewhere.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. But
just make sure. Yeah,
I think you just look up James Davenport.
That's
on Substack.
What you do. You search him.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. So if you're going to do that, then fine. I'd like to share some national news for this week because you and I happen to be profiled in Commonweal. Yes. So for the April edition, that is going to go on newsstands next weekish, I believe, according to their managing editor. So this is a kind of a cultural, religion, and politics magazine out of New York City that we have been profiled in, and really excited about it. John Malsack from the New York Times and other publications, he's got his own as well, came to my American federal government class last April and watched them do a policy debate, my great debate assignment that I've been doing for 11 years now, all the years I've been teaching, and was really impressed with the way that our kids are able to have that discourse, that political discourse, and have those hard conversations without eating each other, without canceling each other, without it devolving into, what we see on the television, what gets exacerbated by the media. And so I'm really proud of that piece. I read it again this morning and just really thought, man, what we do is important. It's impactful. And I really liked the juxtaposition that Malsack did of our, tiny little community college in the middle of Oklahoma against, what's going on at the Ivies. Yes. That discourse is not happening. You're seeing it shut down, and free expression being shut down and not really encouraged in a way that is civil. And so I just am beaming about this piece. So I hope you guys we'll certainly post the link to the article as well. But yes. Commonweal is an awesome magazine, and we are just pleased as punch to have been profiled in it.
And I have been delayed in sharing that as broadly as I should via social media and whatnot. But it just confirms what I've been telling people all along, which is Emily is a rock star, and she's getting recognized in all of these national media outlets and such.
Your name was in there too.
Yeah, but lots of pictures and so it was awesome. I was sitting there going, man, that is just fantastic.
Thank you.
So no, I think you're right. I think the way they approached the discussion, the fact that they visited with a variety of faculty of different institutions.
Students.
Yeah. And exactly.
Highlighted quite a few of our wonderful students.
That's right. So yes, I think it is only good for us. Yeah. It's good for our students. And I think bottom line, it's also good if they'll bother to read it for some legislators who think that, we're just stifling perspectives and speech that we don't like and that kind of stuff.
All
right?
woke indoctrinators. Right. Yeah. It's cool. I'm really, really pleased. That's a career highlight, I think, for the both of us. Very cool.
So yes, we will make sure to put that in the show notes as well. And then I'll push it out for various social media stuff too. Well, we have a fantastic guest today. This is a show that we've actually been planning for a month or maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit more.
Our producer, one of our fantastic producers here at Possibilities, Inc., gained his formal U.S. citizenship about a month ago, Santiago Ramones. And he's going to join us, and we're going to hear his story and talk about the process that he went through and let him share some insights about that and maybe some perspectives on, what that feels like in the current environment that we're in, that type of thing. Yeah. So, Santiago, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, what I would really like to do is just start with your story.
Yeah, thank you. Good boy. Good
when
James.
Did you come to the United States? What were the circumstances? How did you progress as far as...
Really, I want to go further than that. Where were you born? Like, tell us the story.
That's right.
Okay, so it starts even before me, in that...
Usually it does. An immigration story usually does.
Yes,
absolutely.
Both my parents, born in Venezuela, and whenever they were young adults, they actually both studied abroad in the United States. So my dad was in the Venezuelan Navy, and he traveled a lot in doing that, but he also studied abroad and spent some time actually in Oklahoma. And then my mom also studied abroad. She went to NEO, Northeastern Oklahoma, whenever they had a exchange program. And at the time, Venezuela was dealing with more economic prosperity due to their oil boom. Mm-hmm. And so, they were actually recruited to be like, hey, come visit the United States. We want more students from Venezuela. And so my parents had already had some sort of fondness for the United States. And then, later on, my parents married, had some kids, and Hugo Chavez, president at the time, my mom never liked him and was kind of seeing the writing on the wall. And because they already had some sort of fondness for the United States, they kind of wanted to come here. My mom more so than my dad. My dad was working in actually the oil industry. Mm-hmm. And so, there was a thing that happened that basically my mom and my two brothers, I was with a babysitter at the time, but she had my two brothers, they were carjacked.
Oh my goodness.
And they held a gun to my brother's head.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was kind of like the last straw for her. And so she was like, let's go. So in 2001, on my birthday, October 20th, 2001, the day that I turned 6, we moved to the U.S. We flew to the U.S. on a visitor visa, and that was how we came here. And so because they already knew people in Oklahoma, they already had some family friends, and so we came to Oklahoma City. And they sort of made this compromise to basically my mom and my 2 older brothers would stay here in the US, and my dad would continue to work abroad. And so that allowed him to make a little bit more money. This is sort of a pattern that you might recognize with immigrants, is that like any sort of degrees and like documentation that they have seem to be more legitimate in other places than they do in the United States. And so any sort of degrees and qualifications are treated more respectfully abroad than they are in the US. And so that was more beneficial for my dad to remain working abroad. So you cannot just stay in the US indefinitely on a visitor visa. And so it was a very difficult decision for them to let our legal status pass. And so that's what's called being out of status. So we came in entirely legally. And then my mom has actually she continues to be a housekeeper. She cleans houses. And that's what she was doing and continues to do. And yeah, so we just kind of stayed in the US, went to school here. I graduated from Putnam City North High School, as did both my brothers. And one of the big things about my story is that because I was undocumented, I didn't have a driver's license growing up. And so I was very involved in like extracurricular stuff. I was doing marching band, I was doing school musicals, I was doing choir, show choir, and all these sorts of things which involve being at school after hours. And so what would happen is that I would ask friends for rides home, and we would inevitably sit in the driveway talking until like 3 a.m. And that's sort of my podcast like origin story. And that's why I've been podcasting for so long, because whenever I started my podcast in 2016, it was this whole desire to have those conversations again. Yeah. Anyways, I kind of owe my podcasting career to being undocumented, kind of. So yeah, after high school, I went to UCO as a music major.
Yay, Bronchos.
As I was in college, we learned a bit more about DACA, which is this Obama-era executive order called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Right. And there's this big list of qualifications that you have to meet in order to be eligible for DACA. And both my brothers and I were eligible for DACA. And so that is a $400 fee. And for 2 years, you get work authorization, a social security number. And so with a social security number, you can also get a driver's license. But all of these things are temporary. Each one of them only lasts 2 years, and you have to keep reapplying and paying those $400 every 2 years.
So it's kind of an expensive prospect to go through that, right? And especially if you and your 2 brothers, so that's $400 each of you,
yes.
Correct? Right, yeah. So.
Yes. Maybe you will be part of the conversation later, but where does an undocumented person who is not allowed to legally work obtain $400 for the initial application to legally work?
I have some guesses, but we'll get to that later.
But yeah, so that's how DACA works. And DACA is not necessarily a legal status. It is deferred action, which means the USCIS, United States Customs and Immigration Services, knows about your not legal status and has deferred action. They will not take action to deport or do any sort of removal proceedings as long as you give them all of the information of where you are and prove. So like it was a lot of gathering documents. I gave them every single report card and test grade from elementary school all the way through high school. And if you move, you have to let them know. All those sorts of things. Keep reapplying for that.
Can you tell us what, like, I know there's a whole bunch, but what are some of the main eligibility requirements to be considered for DACA status?
Yes. So you did have to enter into the United States before you were an adult. Okay. And so basically it's like you didn't have a choice. And so that's why the thinking was we were going to have some leniency for what, hey, you're here against your will. And so you might as well have some ability to stay here because it's the only life that you know. You also had to have been in the United States when the executive order was signed. Strange, but and then you also had to have basically been in the United States. And if you had left, it couldn't be longer than a certain amount of time. I think it was 3 or 6 months. And so basically saying that like you spend most of your time, all of your time here, you are a resident effectively of the United States. And so all of those things. And then crime. Obviously, you haven't committed any crime, or if you have to like provide all of that documentation and see if you've actually done that process correctly. So I've never committed any felonies or whatsoever. So so those are the things that you have to be in order to be eligible for DACA. As of right now, DACA is not taking new applications. It hasn't been repealed, but it's effectively been neutered. They're not taking new applications, or technically they are, but if you send in your stuff, they're basically just going to like hold it, and they're going to let you know whenever they are going to start actually processing applications. So my advice would be, if you're eligible for DACA right now, today, don't apply because it will not do anything for you, likely for the next 4 years.
All right. So you're in the U.S. You've applied and been accepted for the DACA program. You're going to school. At what point and what prompted you to pursue citizenship? So at what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to make that step? And what was the kind of the impetus for doing that?
Okay, so there is no path to citizenship, period. That's just you can look at the USCIS website. There is no path to citizenship. From DACA, you cannot just become a citizen. From just being undocumented in the United States, you cannot just become a citizen.
If you're accepted to DACA, that gives you no advantage in applying for citizenship. Is that what you're saying? There's no
guarantee.
The advantage of receiving DACA benefit is being legally allowed to work in the United States. That is it. You still pay taxes like anyone else. You won't receive those Social Security benefits, but you are legally allowed to work in the United States, which has those benefits. And there's one step in between. So whenever people talk about citizenship, they're actually forgetting permanent residence, also known as green card.
Yes.
And so the way that I obtained my green card is, I've been living in the United States my whole life. We fall in love with the people that we're around. I got married to a U.S. citizen. And so that is how I was eligible for a green card. Green card eligibility has its own big, weird list of things. And not a whole lot of people are eligible for green cards. And so permanent residence is legal immigrant status. You live in the U.S., you can work in the U.S. A green card is also a work authorization. But only certain people can apply for permanent residence. So if you are the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, that is either being married to a U.S. citizen, if you have a parent or a child that is a U.S. citizen, siblings are not quite treated the same. And then there's another level beyond that, which is like the people who are applied for by their employer. And so they are considered to be valuable workers to that company, and they can apply for permanent residence on behalf of that immigrant. Yes. However, in order for that company to do so, they have to actually put out a job listing for that job. And once they determine that this job can only be done by that immigrant, then they can apply for permanent residence on their behalf. So that's also rather rigorous and maybe to use a legal term, a lot of scrutiny in order to be eligible for that. And then there's this sort of like genius one. Basically, the United States has certain people that they want to come into the United States. And so, for example, Albert Einstein was one who was eligible for the genius kind of permanent residence qualification. And then there's a whole bunch of like other refugee and asylum statuses that are also able to be applied. We haven't even talked about refugee and asylum and parolee status as well. That's a whole thing. But that doesn't necessarily have to do with permanent residence. And so, I got married and was eligible for adjustment of status is what that's called. And so that application was $1,400. And you submit all of the evidence that shows that you are in a relationship, any sort of like hard concrete evidence, rent or bills that you pay together, pictures that you have together. You have to effectively prove to the government that this isn't a fraudulent marriage just for the sake of a green card, but that it is a legitimate marriage. And so, you send all the stuff along with all of the other kind of documentation that would basically prove your status. And then also the spouse has to submit evidence that they are a U.S. citizen. Right. So then, we pay for that. They send you a letter whenever they've received it. They send you a letter telling you when your interview is, and that interview is you do it with your spouse, and they kind of are trying to gauge like, okay, are they actually in a relationship or not? They basically just ask like, how did you guys meet? What's that been like? Where do you live? That sort of thing to kind of say, okay, it seems like this relationship is legitimate. Right. Which kind of begs the question is like, what authority does USCIS have to determine whether or not a relationship is legitimate? And is there some sort of government entity or a legal precedent for like, how does one actually judge what a
what's
legitimate
the litmus test for attraction and chemistry? So I have a question. What were your legal rights as you understood them as a permanent residence status holder?
I basically had all of the same rights that I did with work authorization.
Okay.
Except for it wasn't temporary.
Okay. So when I'm asking, so obviously you had the right to work, but beyond that, what constitutional protections did you have, or did you have any?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
In that, so I mean,
sure.
Legally speaking wise, right, the constitutional protections apply to everyone residing in the United States, right? So like people in the United States get free speech regardless of their immigration status. That is what they say. So
sorry, James. I had to ask.
I'm just sitting here thinking that question is being tested right now. Right? Yeah. No, you were thinking exactly the same direction I was thinking as well. Is we're going through this process right now because we have seen in a couple of occasions where people, one who did have a green card was deported. And we had another who I think was here on a student visa. I'm not sure about the second one. Recent story, a young woman who...
Actually 3 at this point, but yeah.
Yeah. And so that question, and my assumption had always been just what you said, which is if you are in the United States and residing in the United States, you are protected under the Constitution. And I quite frankly believe that should be the case.
I mean, regardless, the 14th Amendment promises due process for all persons.
Due process,
not
that's
citizens, right? There is that very clear delineation.
No, the 14th Amendment, I think people don't understand that. Maybe they need to go read it. But the 14th Amendment, it uses the word citizen and it uses the word person in different places. And it is clear it was intentional.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. It was intentional.
And so I think that we're thinking in the same direction that these questions of what are your constitutional protections are being thrown to the forefront because of what we're seeing happen with the current administration and their approach to immigrants that say things they don't like.
Yeah.
Right.
Period.
Basically.
No,
right, yeah.
no, not basically, period. Yes, absolutely.
So I think that was a question that needed to be asked because we're seeing that.
Well, I mean, the fact that you're not clear, right? That there's not a clear delineation. Like, here, Santiago, here are your rights as permanent resident, right? As student resident, right? There should be clear delineations of this so that there is no gray area when this happens. I'm going to get off my soapbox because I'm going to say some things. But I am upset. You know how I feel about free speech and civic expression, like political expression. This is a democracy. What is happening is antithetical.
Of all of the speech that was supposed to be protected by the First Amendment, political speech was supposed to be it, right?
That is the whole reason.
And for some reason, we seem to be backtracking on that. And so obviously, the environment now is a little bit different than when you were going through this process, but it still is very interesting. Like you said, nobody's communicating to you, hey, in this status, whether it's DACA or having your permanent legal status, nobody's communicating to you, and here are the protections you have under the Constitution with this status, right? That seems like that would be basic information that
like you have
should be provided.
I don't know, a guidebook or something. Like I literally, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so they do send letters whenever you receive the documentation. Whenever I got my green card, it is a card. It is green.
Thank you for the myth.
And the letter that comes with it, it does say that, like, hey, here is what this card grants, which is, like, they explicitly state, like, hey, this card, even though maybe in the past you may have had work authorization documents, this card is an employment authorization document. And so I know for sure that a permanent residence card is effectively just an employment authorization document that lasts longer than the temporary one that I received for DACA, which was blue. That was a blue card. And so residents can't vote in elections, though that is a right that is held only for U.S. citizens. But still get to pay taxes.
Yay!
And legally work in the U.S. And as far as like other things beyond that, it was not explicitly stated. I started my business. I'm self-employed. I have an LLC. I started my LLC in 2020. So I don't know necessarily.
I mean, but that's still attached to like your employee identification. I mean, that's still attached to your, I mean.
Right. Well, I mean.
That's not, I mean, yay, you've got the right to work. You've got the right to pay us taxes. You have the right to build our economy. But I want to know what your constitutional protections, your civil liberties,
when you think
and
about
civil rights are.
You know, again, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth Amendments.
Yes, sir.
Those.
I mean.
Where do those apply? And of course, people only think, well, that's only if somebody did something wrong, but that's not.
Sir.
Those are for protecting us from people just making accusations and hauling you away in the middle of the night or off the street
or
while
in
you're
the
going
middle
to
of the
class.
day. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's very. Listen, that we pick up on that stuff, and it's very interesting to us to hear that part of this is just not made clear to anybody. And maybe that's intentional.
And do you think
I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that chill their participation in the wider political community?
It would have
right?
to, wouldn't you think? I would think so, right?
Which is unfortunate. Deeply unfortunate.
People think, obviously, as you mentioned, only citizens can vote, but as a permanent legal resident, you can attend political rallies, you can attend protests, you can write letters to the editor, all of this other stuff. Yeah. But if that's not communicated, and if stuff we're seeing now going on is making people think, I'm just going to not say anything.
At all, yes.
Which is the point.
It absolutely
which is the point. Okay.
Yeah.
We've diverged a little bit there, but it's an important part of the conversation that we needed to flesh out a little bit. Yeah. So you get your permanent legal status. Now, does that give you an advantage in applying for citizenship?
Okay. So let me explain a little bit more actually about how that permanent residence plays out, especially through marriage. Sure. And so we had a very nice agent or whatever. They let us know that whenever we were having our interview, to actually wait a little bit before sending in the additional evidence. They need a little more evidence before they could grant the permanent residence and adjustment of status, because generally, whenever you receive permanent residence through marriage, there is a probationary period. Okay. And I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 years, but basically you get a temporary permanent residence. And it basically is there to see if this marriage will remain for that amount of time.
Yeah, right.
And if you make it to the
that's so America.
Yeah. I believe it's 2 years. If I'm remembering correctly.
I bet it is 2 years.
And so if you make it to 2 years, then they give you the actual permanent residence, which is 10 years. And so after 10 years, you can reapply for permanent residence and to just extend your permanent residence. Is this really more permanent? Like, sure, yes. Give me 10 more years.
So permanent legal status is not really permanent. It
is a longer resident status than I would have received.
I'm learning so much today. Through
a student visa or through DACA or whatever.
Gotcha. So that protects, I guess, from divorce, perhaps. So if they get divorced within that 10 years, are they supposedly going to come back and commit fraud? Or, I mean, we've seen Hollywood movies about this. Like it's.
Yes, I was thinking of some of those movies. Right? Yeah.
So I don't think it necessarily changes anything if you get divorced within those 10 years because you've already been
awarded your status.
Yeah. And so the status has already been adjusted.
But then reapplying, though, is going to be a problem, probably.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not sure.
You're not sure, thankfully, right? And knock on wood, we wish your marriage well.
Right. And that's not something I've had to look into.
Yeah, right. Fair enough, sir. Fair enough.
But
we go down rabbit holes.
Yes. by the time that we were about to receive our status, it was about to be 2 years of us being married. And so actually, I think it was 2021 because we got married in 2019. And so we sent the stuff after we were married for 2 years.
About 2 years.
And so instead of receiving the temporary 2-year green card, I just got the long green card.
Yes. The 10-year.
And so we were able to kind of bypass the probationary green card.
Nice.
So, okay, in order to be eligible for naturalization is the other word for applying for citizenship or becoming a citizen. People who are married to U.S. citizens have to have permanent residence for 3 years before they're eligible to apply for citizenship. People who are the immediate relatives of U.S. citizens but are not married. So like, for example, my parents got their green cards through my older brother, Jesus, who had become a citizen soonest out of any of us. And so they applied for green cards through him and they had to wait 5 years. And so what actually ended up happening, I guess maybe I'm jumping forward a little bit, is that both my parents and I got our citizenship in the same week because of the way that lined up.
That's fabulous.
And so, yeah, they had gotten their green cards 5 years ago, and I'd gotten my green card 3 years ago, and it just lined up perfectly. But yeah, so these probationary periods, I suppose, that like, I guess you have to have lived in the United States and been here as a permanent resident for long enough to understand what America is or something.
Right.
I'm trying to maybe interpret the intention of this probationary 3-year, 5-year, whatever that means. So yeah, after 3 years of being a permanent resident, I could apply for naturalization, which costs $710 if you apply online. It's $780 something if you apply through paper. And that involves a test and an interview. And that test is a civics test and basically testing if you understand English well enough. However, English is not the official language of the United States, but the naturalization test does involve knowing English. And that civics test has 100 questions, but you have to answer 10 of them correctly. If you answer, I think, 4 or 5 of them, they just go ahead and pass you. Or maybe it's 20. I don't remember. I did very well on the test, so I didn't have to worry about that. But love it. And yeah, so the test has very, simple, I guess, maybe to our understanding, but maybe to someone who wasn't raised in the U.S. might be a lot more difficult.
Oh, I have my kids take there are apps where you can, I'm sure you know, practice test for the citizenship test my brain just wonked out, practice exams for this. And my kids at the beginning of the semester fail them, right? No, so yeah, no, I don't think that it is just people who are not from here, who are not well versed in what's going on. And some of those questions are pretty obscure.
We obviously expect immigrants to know more formally about the country than we expect those who are born here, right? To some extent, right?
I agree.
They got to measure some, and I won't go down this rabbit hole that goes to the this push to make high school seniors take or pass the citizenship
because
test.
We can do this on another day.
But that
Let's bring
you
some
get
experts
that.
in for that.
Yeah. So
because I want to argue about that.
I'm not excited about that either. But
at all.
Who knows? But anyway, it's just interesting that the body of knowledge you have to know to be able to successfully pass that and to basically successfully navigate this whole process, multi-year.
All kinds of forms.
Lots of money you have to be able to come up with to do this, and in the meantime, you're never guaranteed it's going to play out in your favor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the test has questions like what are the three branches of government, or who was the first president of the United States, and stuff like that. But then it's also got maybe more historical questions like what did Susan B. Anthony do, and what was the Cold War over, and stuff like that. And they have very specific answers that they want for those. So yeah, it's varied information that I suppose is relevant to the United States and that they want you to answer in the way that they would like to hear. And then, yeah, there's like a little bit of like writing. Basically, they have a question on an iPad and they actually just tell you the answer.
Oh, okay.
And they just want you to write down that answer.
Interesting.
And so it's not even so much about knowing the answer to that question. It's about being able to write down
English,
that answer.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. And so once you pass, you don't get naturalized right then. Right. There is then a ceremony that happens in some later date where a whole bunch of people come together and it's a thing. And then you do the Pledge of Allegiance and the Oath of Citizenship, which involves disavowing your citizenship to other places. Although that's not necessarily how citizenship works for other countries, regardless of if you disavow your citizenship, that is not necessarily going to nullify your citizenship for other countries. But if you become a citizen of the United States, you do make an oath to not be a citizen or to not have allegiance to other countries outside of the United States. And yeah, I had mine in the courthouse downtown. And it was neat. And then you get this big piece of paper that has your picture and your information on it, and it says you're a citizen. They also took my green card and they shred it.
Okay.
I was a little sad about that because like this little card was like important to me.
Yeah.
I have it scanned, so it's fine. Yeah. So after that, I actually registered to vote right there. They had people there present to register you to vote. And then, you have to send some stuff to the Social Security Administration to like get some things adjusted there. And then, then you're eligible to apply for a passport. And that's sort of one of the bigger things that, because for me in particular, I had a passport whenever I was 6 years old. That expired at some point after that. I suppose I could have gone to a Venezuelan embassy to have it renewed. But I don't know about the complications with that and how that works. So I was kind of effectively trapped in the United States. Although I guess I still haven't applied for my passport. And so I'm still technically trapped in the United States.
I need to reapply for mine. So I'm trapped with you, sir.
Yeah. So after all of those things, all of the navigating the documents and applications and all that sort of stuff, one thing that I wanted to note is that I did not go through a lawyer or a preparer, as they're called, because I have enough of an understanding of the English language to be able to interpret what the forms are asking for and to send the information accurately. However, not everyone that is eligible for these things is able to interpret English in such a way that they can fill out these things by themselves. I just have had the privilege of being here since I was 6 years old. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a lot of documentation. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of evidence that you have to gather. You forget about all of the places that you've worked for the past 6 years, and then you know, or all the places that you've lived for the past 6 years. And there's also a bunch of questions about like if you've ever committed a crime and all that sort of stuff. And if you answer any of those questions incorrectly, it can just straight up halt the process. But basically, it's just like a whole range in the applications where you just say no a whole bunch of times. But yeah, on the other side of that, I'm now a U.S. citizen, many thousands of dollars, maybe many years later. And then the other weird thing, though, is that in 2020, near the end of Donald Trump's first term, the Department of Justice established an Office of Denaturalization, which is dedicated to denaturalizing, removing the citizenship status of people who have either obtained their citizenship fraudulently or have been involved in some sort of terrorist activity. So we'll see what that means and what fraudulent means in a legal stance and what terrorist activity means in a legal stance, and how they can denaturalize people. That is a thing that they have been doing since 2020. So going back to the thing about rights, and what free speech and whatever all of those things mean, I am still a different kind of citizen than both of you. I was not born in the United States, and I was a naturalized citizen, and that is still, from a legal standpoint, different than a natural-born U.S. citizen.
I don't like that. I want to say there is no legal distinction between you and us once you have been naturalized.
I agree.
I am shocked to hear about an Office of Denaturalization.
I'm a little flummoxed.
And so we need
I hadn't heard about this.
We need to do some investigation on that, because I am of the opinion,
This is crazy.
once you have been naturalized, you are a citizen. And the government can't revoke that. That's my opinion.
Oh, and it was updated on February 5th, 2025. So.
Of course it was. So we need to check into that and figure out.
Well, look at Santiago breaking political science news.
Right. This is something that I find you want to talk about something that is un-American. Having an office devoted to revoking people's citizenship is just... to me is outrageous. If someone becomes a naturalized citizen and then they commit a crime or they engage in terrorism, even, we have ways of punishing them. But I don't like the idea that could be used preemptively in some cases, right? Could we say, well, you didn't commit the crime, but you associated with these people, therefore, or you expressed some type of opinion that was in some way aligned with these people over here who did commit this.
Quote,
therefore,
adverse policy, foreign policy consequences, unquote.
Right. And so
I love it. I love that quote.
This
define
really,
this,
I'm.
So the thing that worries
not
me
happy
is that
at
it
all.
was established to bring justice to terrorists, war criminals, sex offenders. I think we can all agree on that. But the part that bothers me is other fraudsters. Define that, right?
What do we mean by fraudster?
Yeah.
I mean, well, historically speaking, the United States also has difficulty with defining terrorism as well.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
No,
And we already have an Office of Immigration Litigation. So where's DOJ and the redundancy? Right. Where are the redundancy police on this?
I think there's another
man.
topic for another episode down
for
the
sure.
line.
We need to
here
get an immigration lawyer.
Because that strikes me as just wrong in so many ways.
Very interesting.
So what that means is even if I'm an immigrant and I gain my citizenship, I can't be confident that I'm going to retain that citizenship if somebody in the executive branch decides they want to aggressively use the other fraudster approach to saying that I've done something that should negate that, right?
And this is where it comes back down to, and if you're interested in this, I talk more about it on OETA this evening at 5 p.m. Thanks to James Davenport. It really comes down to the delineation of rights and liberties for those citizens or for those status holders. Period. If we're going to give you the status, if we're going to make you go through the motions, pay the price, etc., which I don't mind. I think that the process should be way more efficient, etc. We can have that argument, but if we're going to do that, then you ought to know exactly. You should be given an American flag, your citizenship, papers, like he said, and also told exactly, like a Bible, almost a tome, right? Why are we not giving this social? I mean, it's a social contract. You've now entered into a legitimate social contract as an American citizen, as Santiago mentioned, with a different status. And so what does that entail? What are my rights? What are my liberties? You know, this fires me up. Like, oh my goodness.
All right. So how long from the time you applied for your first DACA status to gaining your citizenship, how long was that process?
So I will sort of delineate, right, is that if I had not been married to a U.S. citizen, there would have been no way for me to become a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
I'm going to make that clear that I think it was 2014, 2015, whenever I first applied for DACA. And so if I had not married my wife, who I love and I'm grateful for, I would have just indefinitely been reapplying every 2 years, $400. And there is no way to change your status from deferred action for childhood arrival status to permanent resident to citizen.
We love communication that goes both ways, not just you listening to us pontificate. We would love to hear from our audience. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to contact us about possibly being a guest on the show, please email notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu.
I'm going to tell you a story. This happened when I worked for a member of Congress. We had a couple of Iranian brothers who lived in Ponca City, had lived there almost their entire lives, but were not here in a legal status. And they were getting ready to be deported back to Iran. And there was no DACA at that time that they could apply for. And so the only real option that was on the table for them was for a private bill to be written by the congressman for them specifically to allow them legal status to stay. And so our office worked that issue. But again, we're talking about people who they grew up in the United States. They went to school in the United States. They're working here. They have no connection
Socialized.
They have no connection in their case, no connection to the country that they were born from or that their parents came from. And yet we were going to send them back, and they were most certainly going to be interrogated and harassed, and perhaps even worse when they step foot in Iran, right? And so it seems to me that of all the things that we ought to be able to agree upon is those who have come here as minors and have lived the majority of their lives here and are Americans in every possible way you can imagine, except for a piece of paper. We ought to be doing everything we can to change that for that group. And listen, we've had this discussion before. I think it ought to be as easy as possible for people to come here, immigrate here, work here, and at some point become citizens, right? So the Cato Institute put together this wonderful little kind of game where you had to navigate all the pieces of trying to immigrate and become a citizen. and how convoluted and how complicated and how many roadblocks could be set up, right? You answer one question wrong and you're done, right? And so that whole process. But if there's anything we ought to be able to agree upon, is that people who are in that situation, they are Americans. And we ought to be treating them like Americans, regardless of anything else, right? I am so happy that you were able to navigate this process.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for your family that they were able to do so as well. But it wasn't easy, and you never knew for sure that until you got the citizenship. And now I'm learning, even though you have the citizenship, you may not feel completely guaranteed that, I'm a full-fledged citizen and I'm not going to have any repercussions here. But so many people aren't able to make it through that process. And we're not doing our nation any, take off the, obviously we're not doing them any favors. We're not doing our nation any favors through this process either.
Not the future economy. I mean, we can talk about the next 10, 20 years, 30 years, because people like me are only having one child.
I know. I've been I've been working her on that, by the way. Yeah.
You're going to need.
I'll hit him up for about that too, right?
Go to Santiago. He's young, and let him do that.
But I really am happy that you have a success story here.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I hope that others will be able to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We can do this. I'm concerned that in our current environment, there's a lot of people who are just going to try to stay in the shadows,
under the radar,
try to avoid being seen at all. Don't want to initiate, and I don't blame them in some instances, because if you are here in an undocumented, and by the way, I want to go back to something you said early on, that you came here in a legal status. Your family came here on a visa. My understanding is about 2/3 of those who are in an undocumented status did the same. They came here legally. They did not enter the country illegally,
but let visa
and the visa expired for whatever reason. There should be a process that says, you know what, we're going to get those folks settled, right? We're going to do this, especially for those who come here. They've established families. They've been working. They've been contributing to their communities in a variety of different ways. So we need to do something about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm not really sure why, I don't know. We're getting close. Anyway, I'm not sure why we make it. I mean, I do understand, right? It's this nativism. It's, all of, but just because they immigrate does not mean that there's less fidelity, that there's less patriotism. In fact, there's more.
You can make the argument that there would be more. This is the thing I tell people is you talk about the people who give up their lives as they knew it, take an arduous journey, a precarious, in some cases, very precarious journey here, get here and then establish a law. Those are the people you want. They've demonstrated they want to be here and they want to contribute.
So I don't know. I keep an eye on the time. No, but I'm the producer of this podcast. Me, however long you want it to be. So there's some things to note in that. So one, again, there is no way to adjust from visitor status to some sort of permanent status. And a visitor visa does not grant employment authorization. So that is one of the big things as to, okay, we can ask the question, why would someone allow their status to lapse and become out of status? And the answer is because there are no other options. I have this, I just call it the migrant's dilemma. And it's not much of a thought experiment, but it explains a lot. So the migrant's dilemma is you can either stay in your home country and face either danger, death, or economic instability, poverty, whatever, or you can migrate to the United States and deal with whatever difficulties there might be in being undocumented or out of status. Which would you choose? And so that question alone effectively accounts for the what we might call immigration problem, in that there is no systemic answer to that question. And I believe, opinion, that any legislator that doesn't attempt to answer that question is not dealing with immigration in good faith.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. I agree. The other thing I did know is a student visa does not give you a way of transitioning to legal permanent status.
Which is the silliest thing you've ever heard, right?
My gosh. Talk about really cutting your nose off to spite your face.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ridiculous.
This has been fascinating. You revealed some information to us that we didn't know.
I've learned lots today.
We're gonna dig into some of this, and maybe another show down the line, come back and revisit some of the things that we have learned. Thank you again, Santiago, for sharing your story.
And everything else you do for us.
Right. I think it is a story of hope, of perseverance, but you did have, I'm going to put this out there, you had some advantages that other immigrants might not have as well, right? In being able to understand how to navigate this. And so hopefully our environment will change. We'll begin to understand the contributions that people from all over the world can make to our country.
Have made.
And continue to make and solve this issue. This is not a new... Again, I worked for a member of Congress in the mid-'90s. We were talking about immigration and stuff back then.
Talking about it in the Boston Massacre. What are we talking about? Before we were even a country.
So it's always been this kind of love-hate relationship with the process. But your story is a great story. And we both think so highly of you and the work that you do and the professionalism that you exhibit. As well as the kindness and the empathy that you demonstrate as well. So
he's a good kid.
Congratulations to you and your family. And we want to remind everybody that
democracy is not a spectator sport.
We'll see you later.
Hey everyone, this is Deborah, the resident Gen Z member of the Not My Generation podcast family. Not My Generation is produced in the Possibilities Inc. studio. This episode was produced by Santiago Ramones. It was edited by Santiago Ramones. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Send a voice memo to notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu and you could hear your voice on an upcoming episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the podcast with others. You can check out previous episodes on any podcast app and on our podcast website at notmygeneration.captivate.fm, where we also provide our show notes. And remember, you can follow Not My Generation on X, formerly known as Twitter, at NMG Podcast, and on Facebook at Not My Generation Podcast. We look forward to interacting with you soon.